Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling, award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners from coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe, and viewers too. Gab, Truth, Brighteon, YouTube if you must, although Google is not our friend, and particularly not my friend. And just about anywhere you want, you can watch my jaw yabber. And for you folks on the radio, this may go on a little bit more than the radio show allows time-wise. Feel free to go to any of the video sites to get the rest of the tidbits that we're going to be covering today. So let me start, because we have a lot to cover. We're going to have a rat-a-tat-tat at the end of the show, and it's going to be mostly international. Lots of stuff you have no idea. I mean, it's not good out there, folks. And the mainstream media, true to form, is not telling you anything. You know, they're just keeping you in the dark like little mushrooms because you can't handle the truth. And besides, there's an election going on, and they don't want you knowing just how screwed up Cadaver and Commie Harris have made the world since Trump left office 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago. Unbelievable. A long 4 years. And let me tell you, if they get back in power, it's going to be the longest 4 years of your life and my life, our kids' life and our grandchildren's life. Yeah, it's not going to be good. We're going to talk a little bit about election and election fraud today and what you can do. I mean, I'm going to be beating this drum. You folks have got to get off the couch. You have got to participate in this election. We're facing fraud. We're facing illegal aliens voting, being registered hither, yither, and yon, which of course was their plan, the Great Replacement Theory, which they denied. Saul Alinsky's Handbook for Radicals, deny, divert, and in the end, get it done, right? The end justifies the means. That's the deal with the Democrats. And the end is control of the government, control of power, and control of you and I and our assets. This is a desperate government. It's $35 trillion in debt, growing, I think it's $100,000 a minute, or is it a second? I mean, at this point, it almost doesn't matter. $240 trillion in total debt, counting unfunded liabilities, and that doesn't even throw in the pension world, which we're going to talk about the next few weeks. Because you pensioners who are listening to me, I sincerely hope that it all goes well for you, and I sincerely hope that it is not the only thing you are relying on for retirement, because the pensions are not in great shape, folks. They are really not in great shape. And I'm going to turn this around just a tiny bit here for this lighting. So I'm doing this late at night. Normally the lighting is different because there's daylight, there's windows in the radio room that bring in great light. But this is the middle of the night, or maybe past the middle of the night, because tomorrow I'm out of here for another book signing, this time in Spencer, Iowa at the Clay County Fair. And I want to thank all you folks there in Western Idaho for a great show. Great seeing lots of old readers getting beat up for books 5 and 6, which are coming soon. They're coming soon. And I'll be getting a newsletter out on the Threads West Media email to all you tens of thousands of people who are subscribed to bring you up to speed on what's going on. www.threadswestseries.com if you want to subscribe and know what's going on with the new books, 5 and 6, 5 Footsteps, 6 Blood of Glorieta Pass, the Civil War book, which, let me tell you, these two books have been fascinating to write. They really have been fascinating to write. You're going to get a big dose of history in these. One of the things which I found in traveling to Western Idaho, and this is Boise, which is a fairly affluent town rapidly growing, or been rapidly growing. A lot of high tech, a lot of pretty good paying jobs in that area. And what I found on the economic front was interesting, why don't we just say? Interesting to say the least. But I'll be sharing that with you because we have a whole economic rat-a-tat-tat too. You know, I've been doing that almost every week for you because you really can't trust, I think you know by now, the numbers coming out of the various government agencies because they are politically motivated. And that is kind of an understatement. I mean, they just lie through their teeth, folks. Over 818,000 to be exact, lies about jobs created, fabricating positions wanted just so that particular indicator stays up. And of course, hiring about 50,000 people a month with our tax money so that they can keep the employment numbers up and grow their power and grow their bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy is self-perpetuating, right? Once you have your cushy government job, well, you got your pension, you got your health care, it goes on after you retire, you get more pay than most Americans do. Let's face it, the supervision and the work schedule, with very few exceptions, and I'm not knocking you government workers, but let's face it, it's not quite the same as an entrepreneur working 24/7 a day, is it? No, it's not. So now you have the bureaucracy, another huge voting block. I mean, it's 4.5 million people. Huge voting block for the incumbents, in this case, Cadaver and Kamala Harris. We're also going to be talking a little bit about, because we're going to be talking about it every week, the Trump assassination conspiracy. And I have a terrific video for you on the site this week. And I want to say thank you to all you who have written me or contacted me to tell me how much you enjoy the videos that we select for you to go along with the radio show and our video, my presentation to you of the news, of things that you're not hearing anywhere else, and the connection of the dots, which we're quite good at, I think, as we've demonstrated over the last 10 plus years, and that nobody else seems to want to, shall we say, dabble in. You know, nobody wanted to dabble in COVID or Wuhan or the lack of efficacy and, in fact, deadly portent of the jabs or of the mandates or of the whole nonsense with Trump from 2016 through 2020, or his current conjured legal, both criminal and civil cases. And I can go on and on. J6, this is all, we're living in a matrix, okay? And you folks, if you're listening to this show, have at least nibbled on the red pill. Many of you, like myself, has swallowed it whole, maybe two of them, a double red pill. Because the matrix that they're trying to portray, folks, is far afield from the reality of where we are as a country, domestically and around the globe, and as a people within this country, a divided people, an intentionally divided people. And of course, you may have noticed in the campaign that they try and stoke that division every way they can, you know, gender and age and income and race, an immigrant versus American, an illegal alien versus immigrant, and I can go on and on. You know the drill. And one of the things that's been coming out in the Trump matter over the last week is nothing. And you know, sometimes nothing tells you a lot about the something you don't know. We're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to point you to this absolutely fabulous video of congressmen interviewing, well, number one, the whistleblower from the Secret Service, kudos to him, Schaefer, Eric Prince from Blackwater, probably the foremost security and protection organization in the world, and Don Bongino, who is a great commentator, number one, and number two was a Secret Service agent and a Secret Service trainer for 3 years, along with being an NYPD cop. So kind of knows his way around that circus, shall we say. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Number one, How about our founder's quote? And this is a good one. This is Thomas Paine, one of my very favorite of the founders. And although he wasn't a founder in terms of being part of the Continental Congress, signing the Declaration of Independence, signing the Constitution, etc., it is he, through his pamphlet, Common Sense, that really revved up the engines and stoked the fires of the revolution up to the time it kind of blew up on April 19th, 1776. So Thomas Paine, quote, "When men yield up the privilege of thinking, the last shadow of liberty quits the horizon," unquote. You know, that is really a prescient quote, because I am petrified that the majority of the American population has been a combination of dumbed down, indoctrinated, fed and consumed with relish all sorts of psyops, and is so involved in their day-to-day situation that they really can't see outside their personal box. They're really playing checkers when they should be playing chess. In fact, they should be playing three-dimensional chess. And part of this is information. And one of the things we can do in this election, with all the censorship that's going on, I mean, I told you last week about the admissions by Facebook, and supposedly Facebook isn't going to do that anymore. Trump kind of hammered that nail home with some statements this week saying that if Zuckerberg commits election interference as he did in 2016, when Trump gets into office, he will spend the rest of his life, that is Zuckerberg, in jail. Good. We shall see how Ernest, our friend Zuckerberg, Zuckbug, at Facebook was when he told the Congressional Committee and wrote his letter, which is posted on the website from last week's show, by the way, that the government coerced him into all sorts of censorship and taking things down and algorithms, etc., and he's not going to do that in the future. Okay, well, you know, time tells all tales, actions speak far louder than words. We shall see. But in the meantime, there's censorship everywhere else, particularly from our quote-unquote friends, Google. Yeah, Google loves us. And some of the other outfits like Bing, you know, Billy Gates's little fling over there. The fling Bing from Billy Gates. Yes, Microsoft, you bet. So I'm going to recommend to you use DuckDuckGo.com and Brave.com, and there's some others that do not censor, that do not keep track of what you're looking at, for how long you're looking at it, what you click on, and all the rest, which goes into a massive data bank to be used both by the enemy to create profits from the information they have stolen from you, and to the government. And that has a whole different, much more sinister purpose. But one of the things you can do, and I've been extolling you, extorting you, or should we say exhorting you, over the last several weeks, is pass shows like this one and others, and videos like the ones we have posted on the website on therightsideradio.com, or articles off to others. Pass them out to 20 people. In the email, say, pass these over to 20 people. That is how we will overcome censorship, right? Word of mouth via technology. And remember to check your spam files. I keep telling you this every week. You will be astounded at how much stuff is being relegated to the trash bin of what Google and the rest of the creeps have decided you shouldn't see, you can't see, and that you ought not to see, because they don't want you informed. They want you part of those people who aren't thinking outside the box and are playing checkers, not chess. All right, enough of that. Our rant story this week. It's kind of an interesting rant story. So, as I told you in the past, my ranch lieutenant of 7 years is leaving. He's actually becoming an expat and going out of the country. I will not tell you what country he's going to, but it's far away. Godspeed to him. He's going to be leaving in the next several weeks. Our new guy is in. He's terrific. He's actually been camped out with me at the main ranch home and will be for a while until he can get into what we call the guardhouse, which is the ranch lieutenant's house. One of the things that I love about the guy who's leaving is, number one, he had a sense of humor. He was really, really, really good at focusing on and getting done the task at hand and being rather ingenuine. The ingenuity that he displayed in some cases was terrific. And he was a scrounger. Boy, he could find good deals out there. I mean, on culverts, on anything the ranch needed. He was terrific. But he was not the most organized, shall we say. And he was not the most neat and tidy, shall we say. And one of the things that we've been trying to get done, and by the way, that includes me, for the last 7 years, is to get the barn organized. We actually had a big barn sale a couple of weeks ago and sold all sorts of extra stuff. If we had more than 3 of anything, it was for sale. And we did pretty well at the barn sale, I might add. We still have a couple of ATVs to sell and some other stuff. But we finally got enough stuff out of the barn where you could maybe see that it had a floor, if you know what I mean. And then we have a building called the loafing shed, which is almost as big as a barn in square footage, but long and narrow. So anyway, to make a long story short, the new guy, who's great, I really like him, he decided he would tackle the barn as his first project. Now, mind you, my departing lieutenant and I have gone back and forth and struggled with this barn and the organization of this barn for years. And trust me, we didn't get very far. In fact, it may have been worse up to a week or two ago than it was when we started the so-called organization. But the new guy, he went down there every day at 6 a.m. He came back at 6 p.m. And every day he made significant progress. And let me tell you, that barn is now as organized as any barn, maybe more organized than any barn I've ever seen. Everything is kind of off the floor, in the proper tray bins, in the proper tool chests, labeled. I mean, it's friggin' terrific, let me tell you. And we actually have room to park machines in there now, which is wow. All I can say is wow. So while it is with regret, and I will miss him, that we say goodbye to our departing ranch lieutenant in the next several weeks, a big hearty welcome to our new one. And sometimes opportunity presents itself, and it presents itself in a way that you never anticipated. And I think what we have done is we've gotten to a point on the ranch where you need somebody who is really kind of meticulous in their organization, and meticulous not as a clean freak, but meticulous in terms of cleanliness and order. And that's really not me. I gotta be honest. And it really, really, really wasn't our departing ranch lieutenant. So everything happens for a reason. I'm delighted with the way everything is turning out. And sometimes, good things happen to those who have no clue that they're going to happen. You make silk out of a sow's ear sometimes. So that's kind of the moral of the ranch story for now. One door closes, another one opens, as it is with life and all aspects of life. Now, let's talk about the Trump matter. So the FBI and the Secret Service have been absolutely mum for the past week. I mean, not a word. We don't even know who the names of the supposed 5 people who have been put on, administrative leave or whatever. Congress has not interviewed one single person yet, not one single Secret Service person or local police person, other than the head of the state police in Pennsylvania and other than the whistleblower Schaefer, who was one of the counter snipers who's come forward. And so the main source of information, which are the people who were on the ground and making the decisions, have not been interviewed. And of course, the Secret Service and the FBI are locked in their investigation and therefore cannot reveal X, Y, and Z. Yeah, you've heard this for years, so I don't have to give you the tripe. Well, there are a number of members of Congress. Ron Johnson in the Senate, great senator, and a number of folks, I gave you their names last week, but there was a new video that came out of one of their other interviews, one of the hearings that they held with Eric Prince, who is the top dog at Blackwater. I mean, incredible firm. And Don Borgino and Schaefer, the whistleblower, also the counter sniper at the Trump deal, one of the counter snipers. And I got to tell you, this video is phenomenal. It's really maybe the best I've seen, and we have several hundred posted on the Trump page. If you go to ontherightsideradio.com, click in the upper right-hand corner where it says Trump assassination attempt, it'll bring you to the Trump assassination conspiracy page. Everything is in sections. You can, I mean, we probably have 300 articles from 100 different sources on there. It might be one of the best compendiums, as is our COVID page, by the way, and our COVID litigation page, of information regarding the conspiracy to kill Trump on the web. And you can listen to varying viewpoints and you can make up your own mind. But let me tell you that this video is one that you must see, because it recaps better than I have over the past 5 or 6 weeks since July 13th that I've been covering this for you. It really, really, really brings home to roost all the anomalies, both pre-assassination attempt, at the time of the assassination attempt, the day leading up to the assassination attempt, and up to now. You know, the slow walk, or should we say the glacier-like walk, of the FBI and Secret Service and their purported investigations. Yeah, okay. Actually, their actual destruction of evidence, as is also described and discussed in this video. This is probably the best summary of these anomalies having to do with this conspiracy to kill Trump that has been put together by anybody. I really urge you to watch this video, pass it on. It's going to be obviously on the Trump page under the plot, that section, and under Secret Service, that section. It's going to be on the home page under the audio bar, rat-a-tat-tat, and treason, which of course is what we saw on live TV, treason. And the other thing I want to tell you is that kudos to these 4 congressmen for not letting this deal drop. I mean, the FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service, and the rest of the government loons who concocted this scheme, this dust-off of the JFK playbook from many years ago, I don't think they counted on the tenacity of some of our elected representatives. And my hat goes off to them. I mean, a really super job, as you'll see when you watch this video, and I really, really, really hope you do. I really hope you do. Now, let's talk about economics, right? Here's a little economic rat-a-tat-tat for you, because, you know, we're still hearing the nonsense, the matrix, right? They figure you haven't taken that red pill. You've taken the blue pill, or you haven't taken any pill. I mean, they're kind of counting on it, that you'll believe in the matrix, folks. You know, you'll believe in the matrix. The hide and seek, the hide the ball, or lie about the ball, or just not even admit a ball exists. I mean, that's probably not too far-fetched with some of these things. So let me give you some more stats on top of all the stats I've given you over the last weeks that will really make you think. Because right now, the drumbeat out there, and you've heard it on the news, right, particularly mainstream media, is that the Fed is about to cut interest rates. And man, that's going to be great. And mortgages are going to go down, and loans are going to go down, and people's costs of borrowing are going to go down, and the economy is going to rev up, and housing is going to be revived from the slump, I mean the big slump that it has begun to fall into, not slide into, but fall into, like off a cliff in many markets around the United States. And I've put videos up for that too, and there's another one this week, okay? And that's under family safety and rat-a-tat-tat and economy. So 5 quarters of negative savings rates. That is more, folks, than any other time since the Great Depression. That means people are taking money out of savings rather than putting it in for the first time for 5 quarters since the Great Depression. That should kind of ring an alarm bell for you. And then you have the great financial, we'll call it mess, of 2007, 2008. Running into that one, folks, as a example, as a comparison, there was only 3 quarters of negative saving rates. So that will kind of give you a taste. The bottom line is that the lowering of interest rates by the Federal Reserve is not the panacea. It is not going to do what they're telling you it's going to do, what mainstream media wants you to believe it's going to do. And when they do cut rates, whether it's 25 basis points, i.e. a quarter of a percentage point, or 50 basis points, a half a percentage point, whatever they do on September 18th, which is the next FOMC meeting, the Federal Reserve meeting, and all the jumping up and down about the dovish stance of Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, at the Jackson Hole Summit a week or so ago, do not believe it. That's all I can tell you is just don't believe it. It's more of the matrix. That's all it is. Let me give you some more stats here. So the Fed rate cuts, which are being trumped up, no pun intended, to be, the end all be all, and, the America will magically emerge from 240 trillion in unfunded liabilities, 35 trillion in debt, and all the other morass of problems we have just because interest rates went down a quarter of a point or 0.5%. In fact, Fed's cutting rates, when the Fed cuts rate, 11 of the last 15 occasions, going back almost 6 decades, has preceded a recession from moderate to severe. That's right. And in the 4 occasions it did not, the economy was growing. Right now, the economy is contracting. And on those 4 occasions, employment was actually going up at a sizable pace. In fact, employment was growing at about 10% a year. And GDP, gross domestic product, all output, all goods and services produced by the country, was at 4% or better. Well, GDP, folks, adjusted for inflation, is negative right now, going into this rate cut. This savior of everything. And employment or unemployment is rapidly rising from 3.2% a year ago to 4.3% now. In fact, here's a really, really interesting stat for you. 1 year ago, there were, I'm rounding numbers, 5.1 million Americans looking for work and out of work. 1 year later, right now, that's over 7 million. That's a 21% growth in unemployed, employable, wanting to be employed Americans in 1 year. That is staggering, staggering. And remember that has not occurred, basically since the Great Depression. That kind of increase from year to year in the number of unemployed people wanting to be employed and able to be employed, that type of growth in that statistic, 21%. The labor market conditions, in the words of Powell, hello, the light bulb maybe blinked at the Fed, or maybe the whole thing was intentional to begin with. We shall see, right? Take another red pill and it should all become apparent to us. But I'll quote Powell, labor market conditions are unstable. Labor market conditions are unstable. Now, whenever the Fed, in Fed speak, says something like that, there's something terribly wrong. because they don't like to get people nervous. They don't like to get people thinking about taking their money out of the banks. So his carefully worded, shall we say, diatribe is a big red warning flag. And he also said that the Fed cannot allow the labor market to deteriorate any further. And that is why they are beginning to cut rates. But it's too little, too late, and it's just going to precede the recession, as history tells us. Another indicator of where we're going here, because the housing market is not going to be rescued by this rate cut, folks. I hate to clue you. Okay, new builders homes. Okay, they are down, in sales by a larger percentage than at any time since 1976. And home builder supply, in other words, the supply of new homes on the market, is the highest it's been, except for 4 other times it's tied with those in the history of the United States. A 9-month supply of new homes. 9 months supply of new homes. And this is with drastic, they're buying down the rates, they're giving away the free refrigerators, the whole 9 yards, the 10-year warranty, everything that they can think of, they're throwing it at the pot. $50,000 to $100,000 in giveaways on houses, and bought down interest rates down to 5%, and they still can't move them. Inventory is still growing toward, it looks like, a record high. So at the time of previous Fed rate cuts, think about this. Previous Fed rate cuts were made at a time, even in the 2007, 2008 great financial crisis, when debt, the United States debt, was only 50% of GDP. Our GDP, never mind what it was then, I'll just go on today's figures, about 28 trillion, okay? So in 2007, 2008 terms, it would have been, 24 trillion. And America's debt was about 10 trillion. In other words, 50% of the GDP was equal to or greater than America's debt. Guess what it is now? Debt to GDP is 123%. We've never been, this is uncharted waters, but it is an indicator, once again, that these Fed rate cuts are not going to do what everybody's trying to tell you they're going to do, because they're facing adverse circumstances that have never before existed. Savings rates. Savings rates, as I've told you, are overall negative for the 5 quarters, the last 5 quarters. First time, really, ever. And 3.4% savings rates in those that are saving, just those that are saving, which is a minority of Americans right now. Previously, before previous Fed rate cuts and other cycles, the savings rate was 9%. 9%. We have a 3-pronged bubble right now, and they're all incredible bubbles. Number 1, in stocks, where stocks are highly overvalued. Number 2, in assets of all sorts, shapes, sizes, and flavors, like housing. Housing in most markets is way overvalued. There'll be another video on the website under that for that, so that you can get into the housing stuff. You people in the South who are listening to me down there in Florida, Georgia, etc., the South is particularly hard hit here. 300,000 homes on the market. It has almost doubled inventory just in the last few months. And price cuts are rampant, up to 40% price cuts in Florida right now. And listen, it's coming to a neighborhood near you. Nobody's going to be immune from this. Certain areas will be more greatly or highly affected than others, but nobody's going to escape the tsunami of problems that are coming at us. whether you're a homeowner, whether you're a business, it doesn't matter, or an individual. And the stock market, when it pops, and it's beginning to, is going to create a whole nother kind of tsunami of fear, which will feed into these other bubbles and speed their collapse, all of which will be, believe it or not, heightened by the Fed rate cuts, because people are thinking to themselves, why are they cutting rates? Look, they can tell you that inflation is licked. I mean, these are the same people who told you there was no inflation, and 2 years ago told you inflation was transitory. They're blaming it on inflation, the rate cuts. What they're really beginning to be petrified about is these three asset bubbles and this rising, rapidly rising employment and labor problem that the United States is facing. By the way, in terms of the stock market, here's another really big red flag for you. This rate cut versus all the rate cuts in the past for 100 years. So prior to every other rate cut, stocks, the value of stocks was 2x the economy. In other words, 28 trillion in stocks would be a $56 trillion, or 28 trillion in GDP would be a 56 trillion valuation in stocks. Not this time, folks. Not this time. In fact, this time it's 3x that 50%. And 72% of previous, or 72% over previous stock valuations when aggregated. All the stock that's outstanding, what's it worth to the GDP? So that kind of gives you the indication of this huge bubble in the stock market. And for my last kind of Grim Reaper story for you, my anti-matrix bullet point, fact point. Indeed, which is one of the largest private job aggregators in the United States. I think most of you are probably familiar with them. For both employers and would-be employees. You put your listing up there as an employer, you put your listing up there as an employee, and Indeed matches you to the position and the type and the area. It's actually a good service. We've used it in the past in several things, obviously not ranch related. Well, Indeed just came out with its report, which is private, right? It's not manipulated by government nonsense, ideology, and the wish to win an election at all costs. So the listings on Indeed for jobs, this is employers searching for employees. Hold on to your bippy on this, is down 45% since 2020, the COVID nonsense. 45%. And of that, it's down 11% year over year. 1 year ago, basically today, to now. The job listings by employers are down 11%. That should tell you a lot about what's really going on out there in the economy and the labor market. And the labor market, folks, is a key component to whether or not we have a recession, how deep that recession is, and how many people get really hurt. And hopefully it will be none of you, because you've been listening to me and other shows like mine, and you've taken half a red pill, at least half a red pill, and you've gotten yourself a little bit prepared. This is not a surprise to you, right? Your eyes are wide open. You are outside the matrix. You bet. All right, let's end up with rat-a-tat-tat, shall we? And we're going to concentrate on some of the international things going on, because nobody's talking about them, and I haven't covered them too well in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Too much domestic fire hose news coming at us. Number one, Mexico, right? It's Mexico, Canada, the United States, the three big North American trade partners. Mexico is our largest trade partner, in fact. You bet. Well, they have frozen all diplomatic relations with the United States and Canada because the United States and Canada criticized their planned reform of the Mexican Supreme Court. Remember that a lefty got elected president in Mexico a few months ago and will shortly take office. And that gal, one of the reasons she won is that 27 other presidential candidates, all of them coincidentally conservative, not communist, were executed, murdered, assassinated in the months leading up to the election. Basically, there was nobody left to run against her. You know, they kind of wiped them all out. I wonder if the CIA and FBI helped them put together their plans or the cartels did it on their own. Anyway, Mexico is kind of stiffening its back, its spine, if you will, against the United States and Canada. This could portend some problematic trade situations in the future, which would not be good for any of the three countries, but particularly for the United States, given its wish to onshore everything it can and its slow motion divorce from the Chinese export market, the Chinese manufacturing market. All right, so Ukraine. As you know, Ukraine, the Western press is crowing about the fact Ukraine has taken 386 square miles of Russian territory by Kursk and blah, 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 blah. Well, the reality is, even though that's probably the best part of the Ukrainian army, they have been just mowed down by the Russians. And they are short of men. They're not short of equipment because, you know, the good old America with Cadaver at the helm and Kami Harris, the last one in the room as he approves the deal, has been sending hundreds of billions of your money and my money over there to perpetuate this farce of a war that we started going back to 2014. Barry Obama started what is happening right now. And it's really not going well for Ukraine. And I'm not a rah guy. I mean, the Russians have good things and the Russians have bad things, and the Russians are certainly not our friend, okay? They are certainly China's friend, and the policies of the United States government drove them into the arms of China. Russia should really be our ally, not China's. That's a discussion for another day. Fascinating history. And I've covered it a little bit in previous shows, the history of Russia-Chinese relations. You can put that in the search bar and in the archives and listen to it, because it was several years ago when it was rather prescient, unfortunately. So look for a big mess in Ukraine, folks. Look for a big mess in Ukraine. And one of the reasons Ukraine was successful in getting so far into the Kursk territories, besides some problems with Russian commanders in that sector and being undermanned, was that they had the technology of the West aiding them with pinpoint targeting and real-time, like up to the second, intelligence. Well, the Russians are now jamming the satellites and other communications devices which have brought them this information, and the Russians are kind of having a field day with what's left of the Ukrainian army in Kursk. Watch for that to collapse, their penetration into Russia, in the relatively near future. We shall see. We shall see. All right, so Brazil. Brazil, as you know, is run by a lefty, election fraud, machines. I've brought you those stories in the past. I mean, it's a repeat of the United States here in 2020. And they have now banned X, Elon Musk and X, because X likes to tell the truth. And, you know, communist governments really like to avoid the truth, distort the truth, alter the truth, or make it, you know, go away. It's an untruth. Don't believe your lying eyes, folks. And they're going to make sure you don't believe your lying eyes in Brazil because X has been banned. What does that mean coming up in Brazil? And I might add, what does that mean coming up in the United States, depending upon how this election goes? There's a Kuwaiti newspaper, Al Jarda, and it appears that Iran has now given Hezbollah some primitive but workable EMP technology to take out Israeli communications, satellites, guidance systems, both for defense against missiles and in launching missiles, offensive weapons. That would be a whole new wrinkle in what's going on in the Mideast, which, by the way, Cadaver and crew, Kami Harris, they keep on telling us about a ceasefire. Okay. You know, there's a lesson over there in Gaza. Those poor 6 hostages, you know, that went through so much for a year were executed as Israeli troops closed in last week. I'm sure you've heard about it. And there's an uproar in Israel and the United States and around the world. Ceasefire, get the hostages back. Folks, this is a perfect example of people thinking in the box and not thinking outside the box. If you give Hamas what it wants, and what it wants is a ceasefire, along with other things, in return for the admittedly horribly held last 100 hostages, the rest have either been freed or killed, then you are simply telling Hamas that whatever they want to get done in the future, they just have to take hostages. It's also sending that message to every other rogue government or outfit in the world, which is why you can't negotiate with terrorists. I mean, I feel really sorry for the parents of one of the remaining hostages who happens to be alive, if they are. And I understand. But this is an occasion where either the Israeli military will rescue these hostages or they will not. But if you start giving in to terrorist demands, particularly in return for hostages, which was the beginning part of terror which precipitated this mess, putting aside history of the last 100 years, you have done nothing but absolutely guarantee yourself that you're going to be doing more of this in the future under much more difficult circumstances. That's that's the Cowboys' take on that, if you will. In Iran, okay, communications and radar ramped up. Russia is flying about one big transport plane a day into Iran. Who knows what's in it? Nuclear war, nuclear weapons, nuclear technology. Whatever it is not good for the United States. It's not good for the carrier fleets. It's not good for Israel, and it's probably not good for the world. And in the meantime, we continue to mollycoddle Iran because Barry Obama loves them, and he's really running the show at the White House along with his staff, which was the same staff he had when he was in office, with Cadaver out there, you know, being Cadaver, and Kami Harris out there dodging questions about all her statements in the past and insisting that she has seen the light, blah, 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 blah. Although in that interview in CNN, you might have noticed that she clung to the phrase, "I've never departed from my values." You know, it seems to me that values drive action. Values drive belief. They don't necessarily drive words, particularly when you're trying to subterfuge the enemy and mislead the voting public. But I found that really interesting that she used that phrase so often because her values, folks, are clearly shown in her own words. You don't have to make anything up about these people, either Timmy or Kami Harris. They have told you exactly what they think on a wide range of topics, and none of it is good for Americans or America. In fact, quite the contrary. We're going to get into a really detailed discussion, I'm still putting it together, on their so-called economic policy, which they guise as to helping the little man in the middle class and hurting the rich guys. Except that's not what it does. It will cripple the middle class. It will decimate the quote-unquote least fortunate class. And it wouldn't even dent the rich guys because the rich guys are Democratic donors, folks. I mean, let's get with the program here. Okay, in France. So Macron, who is by no means a conservative, I mean, at best, he's a lefty moderate, at the very best. Well, the left-wing groups, the coalition, that somehow, after Le Pen, the conservative groups, won the first election, in the second election, a month later, suddenly the left-wing guys won the election. I brought you this story about, 2 months ago or so. Well, Macron has turned down the left wing's offer of a prime minister candidate. They only have 32% of the French parliament, but they're trying to get their person installed in the, so we say, COO position in France, right? Macron is the CEO, and they want the COO, the prime minister. Well, Macron has turned them down, and guess what they did? They're taking a playbook right out of the left here in America. They have filed articles of impeachment against President Macron over there in France. This is going to get really interesting in Europe, folks. Europe is, I'm afraid to say it, but Europe is pretty much beat. I mean, it's on its last legs, and it's not going to be doing particularly well socially either, due to the policies of these non-leaders in a number of countries over the past 5 to 10 years. The Dems, listen, if you thought that election fraud was a myth, and you thought that the machines are doing a great job, and that nobody can tamper with the machines, that they tabulate everything to the proper penny when it comes to ballots and votes, well, it seems that there's 2 counties in Wisconsin that voted to throw out their machines and go to hand count. You know, seems logical to me. In fact, I applaud it. I think the entire election should be paper ballots, hand counted. Guess what? The Dems, Mark Elias and crew, you know, he's their chief warthog, if you will, on anything having to do with election fraud, either defending it or promoting it. They have sued the 2 counties for having this vote and getting rid of their machines and going to paper ballots. Now, if you are in doubt whatsoever that these machines can be manipulated, that they have been manipulated, that they are an integral part of the election fraud plan of the left, then why don't you explain to me why the Democratic Party, the DNC, and its folks there in Wisconsin have hired the top guns to sue 2 counties who want to go to paper, hand-counted ballots. It's kind of indicative, isn't it? The machines must be good for the Dems, or they wouldn't be wasting this time, energy, and legal bullets trying to make sure the machines stay in play. Yeah. I'll have more on this story and some other election fraud stuff for you next week, by the way. And finally, the BRICS versus the farmers. Great video on the website. It's under economy, rat-a-tat-tat, family safety, and private property. So the BRICS countries are now kind of forming their own, should we say, agricultural association. And they're basically cutting out the Western markets, particularly the United States, who we've been told in the Matrix is the breadbasket of the world. Well, it seems that we're not the breadbasket of the world because the BRICS countries are basically telling us to stick it. Other than the land that they own in the United States, like Red China, where they're growing food and shipping it back to their own country. Thank you very much, America, an American farmer, but we're out of here. We'll grow our own stuff. We'll export our own stuff to ourselves, and thanks very much for the property. We really appreciate you, dumb Americans. I'm going to keep you up to speed on this, but basically what the BRICS have set up is they set up a bypass of agricultural trade. And part of this also hinges on what's happening with the dollar and the quick emergence, the rapid emergence of this new, I'll call it the BRICS currency, but it's really Project M-Bridge, small m, capital B, bridge. I've talked to you about it several times here in the past few weeks. They're having a big meeting in October. Better hold on to your hat. If you think the economy was rocky and volatile before that meeting, you just wait till after that meeting, folks. when basically if they decide to do it at that meeting, put a dagger through the heart of the reserve currency of the world, our dollar. Mm-hmm. And of course, it is our lack of leadership and it is our horrible policy decisions, like stealing other people's money that's parked in dollars, then using their money to extract interest and then paying Ukraine, in the case of Russia, who's fighting Russia, the country whose money we stole. I mean, who is going to park their reserves in dollars? They're going to put it in gold, which they are in the process of doing, and in a basket of, shall we say, interrelated currencies and the domestic and national currencies of a number of the BRICS nations. More on that upcoming, because this is going to be a huge deal in October. You've heard it here about first. Great videos on the website the last few weeks under economy, family safety, rat-a-tat-tat. Definitely listen to it. It explains the Enbridge deal in great detail. All right, so that, folks, is the show. And it's a bunch of information. Let me just end this show by telling you that the election now is less than 50 days out. And how this election goes depends on many factors. It depends on the machines. Can't control that because our Republican folks are several years behind the 8 ball in getting rid of them. And now you have 2 counties who are trying to and have been promptly sued by the Democrats for that attempt to go to a common sense solution to people's trust in the election system. Oh, well. It is very important that you, number one, are registered to vote. Number two, that you vote early. Do not wait for Election Day this year. Too much has been going on Election Day. Let me tell you, there's going to be all sorts of disruptions, problems. Remember this CrowdStrike thing like 3 or 4 weeks ago? That was a dry run, folks. If you go down to the ballot place on Election Day and the machines are down, like in Arizona in 2022 in Maricopa County, you are just SOL. You're not going to be voting. They're counting on that. Get your ballots in early. Go down to the county courthouse. It'll take you a fraction of the time that it will on Election Day. Fill out your ballot, hand it to the clerk, watch it go in the machine. You've done your duty in that part. If you're going to be out of the country, get your absentee ballots in. I suggest you hand carry them down to the clerk rather than mailing them. The United States Post Office, it has been proven, has interfered with the delivery of ballots, particularly from Republican zip codes in both 2022 and 2020. Don't give them that opportunity, even though most of the people at the post office, I'm sure, are great folks. Don't give the few oddballs, a few whack-balls, the opportunity to interfere with your vote. Bring it down to the county courthouse yourself, okay? Because your ballot envelopes are very distinct. And any alert and, should we say, less than honest folks down there, or who hate the orange man or whatever their motivation is, it's too easy for them to grab ballots, stick them in a bag, and take them out the back door. Don't do it. And don't wait for Election Day. Get your votes in now. And the other thing you can do is pass the links in this show or the link for this show, and along with all the other shows that you may watch or that you may listen to that appeal to you, that you think are true, that you think are fact-based and backed, and pass them out to 20 people with an email that says, pass this out to 20 people, and remind them to put in their email when they pass it out, to pass it out to another 20 people. Let's get her done, Jethro, shall we? You keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you next week.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Read Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.